Bernie Sanders also in these new polls gets higher marks than Clinton on his willingness to take on Wall Street and the financial elites, the people we refer to as our audience. What does this do to the race?
These numbers are going to drive the news all day today. These are big top-line numbers for Bernie Sanders. You're getting a quarter of the Democratic electorate, presumed Democratic electorate, in the two earliest primary states. That's a big deal. Hillary Clinton support 56% in New Hampshire, 50% in Iowa. Again, you expect, the way we've been talking about Hillary Clinton up to this point, that she would be in the 60s or the 70s. But, and I think this is a really key point, you need to look below the numbers here. Hillary Clinton's favorables in New Hampshire, 86%. Her favorables in Iowa, 88%. If you look at all of those polled in both states, who do you think will be the Democratic nominee? 80% in Iowa say Hillary Clinton, 80% in New Hampshire say Hillary Clinton. Who do you think can beat a Republican candidate? Only 12% in Iowa say Bernie Sanders. There are major structural problems with Bernie Sanders here. What this is underscoring, though, is that he has a message. The message is resonating, and it's one that Hillary Clinton needs to keep an eye out for on the policy front as we move to these states.
You know, these are brand new polls from Bloomberg Politics, and one of the bottom line numbers that caught my attention was that he scores higher on authenticity than Hillary. Does that matter in a real election?
On the margins.
Yeah.
I think on the margins. Look, and it matters in New Hampshire, where you are going to sit there and you're going to take every question that every audience member has to ask. It matters.
Can he drag her to the left?
Yes, absolutely he can. Between Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, you've seen Hillary Clinton be dragged to the left, at least on what she's talking about.
Phil, this is a parlor game that you guys in Washington live and breathe. I'll be honest, I'm bored with it. Let me cut to the chase.
Yep.
Does Secretary Clinton have negatives like Senator Ted Kennedy used to have?
No.
When she gets to the general election, is she going to be buried like Ted Kennedy?
When she gets to the general election, if you look at her numbers, they've been fluctuating a lot in the last couple months. Nationally, she has problems that she's going to have to overcome. She has narratives that she's going to have to overcome between the emails, between the Clinton name in general, between just the people the Clintons are always associated with.
But they're not overwhelming negatives.
They're not overwhelming negatives, and particularly within the Democratic Party. She is in a really good place.
How does she
right
win
now.
Ohio, just as one state?
How does she win? She is able to grasp what the Obama coalition was and turn it out. I think if you look at minority voters, if you look at Hispanic voters, if you look at places like Columbus, where you have college and minority voters that you need to turn out, if you look at places like Cincinnati, where you need to turn out minority voters, that's how she wins Ohio. And you hope that Rob Portman or John Kasich, the governor of Ohio, the senator from Ohio, are not on the ticket.
Are not a VP candidate.
What about South Carolina? Can she undo the damage that her husband did there to her during the 2008 primary?
I think what you've seen over the last week is very helpful in that kind of healing process. Hillary Clinton has gone very big on the race issue over the last couple of weeks. These are things both on race and on being a female candidate. These are issues that she largely avoided in 2008. Race for an obvious issue, not wanting to get into it with President Obama. Female candidate because she didn't want to make it about that. She wanted to make it bigger than that. She's embracing both of those issues right now. What you've seen over the last week, particularly as racial issues have really kind of taken over in the country's dialogue, she has embraced it. She's gone after it. In South Carolina, that matters and that resonates.
Who's most likely in her own circle, in the Democratic circle, to put a little dent in her campaign, to do some of the Republicans' job for them?
You know, what's going to be most interesting, and I think this goes back to the structural issues of Bernie Sanders, he doesn't have an in-depth team. He doesn't have an infrastructure in a campaign. And part of that is an infrastructure in a campaign, if you're taking somebody on in a primary, is opposition research. It's the ability to hammer somebody to try and drive up their negatives. That's not necessarily Bernie Sanders' MO on the campaign trail, and he doesn't have the team behind the scenes to do that as well. So I think what's going to be interesting is to see what if he changes on that, and if Martin O'Malley, the former Maryland governor who Brendan loves so much, if he decides to attack, if that can actually drive up her negatives.
Okay, Phil Mattingly, thank you so much.